Beautiful morning right here on our Lovington studios. Thank you so much for always keeping it Every TV. And I'm right here. It's a Thursday morning where we talk matters business, and we're here to equally update you on what is happening in the world of news as always. My name is Linda Alela. Thank you so much always for your time. Welcome aboard. Important that you interact with us. Hashtag New Day KE, the SMS line 40920. And of course, we get to hear what you have to say about generally where you are in terms of the weather, in terms of matters education, address matters health, and crucial issues that you sort of feel like are of importance to mention. We'll certainly get to give you those heads up, and equally get to go through some of your comments before we get to wind up the show. So welcome aboard. And as always, when we talk matters economy, we take a look at the status of the economy. And today we'll be focusing on the county level. And of course, being the junior governments, what is left of them amid this standoff that we're talking about, the Division of Revenue Bill. Now President Uhuru Kenyatta coming out strong to maintain his stand that the governors should work with what has been allocated to them, as opposed to rendering the county at a standstill, as you've seen, or maybe the threats that have been made good by county workers to go on a strike. So there's so much. Also, we'll be addressing on the question of education and generally on the question of basically matters economy. And of course, CPA Enoch Monari joins me as always to expound much more. Equally, we'll be taking a look at the SME world and what we can do as a country, in comparison to those countries that have actually developed pretty well to ensure that we can pick up a leaf, or we can just borrow a leaf and, try and see to it that we make the best of our SME for the sake of the growth of the economy. So incredible discussion right here. It's just 1 hour of your time, but certainly 1 hour that is worth. So ensure that you keep it right here. First things first, let's take a look at what you expect on the newspapers.
Don't even take my phone.
Front page of the Standard newspaper. Yes, front page of the Standard newspaper. Waiguru, Mount Kenya is ready for Raila. Of course, all that in Politics 2022. And crossing over to the Daily Nation, top Kenyans to face U.S. trial over Acacia drugs. Of course, those are the stories that you'll definitely be getting on the newspapers. We'll be expounding more on that briefly with my, of course, panelist, or the guy that is on board to ensure that we get to learn more about business. But that aside, also, there's that tough talk of President Uhuru Kenyatta that has been touched on the front page, and equally the aspect of matters education, where TSC officially announces 5,000 teaching vacancies. So that means these are job opportunities for about 5,000 Kenyans, as agency says 4,000 high school teachers will be recruited to cater for the high number of students enrolled, and another 1,000 with degrees in primary school promoted. And of course, that is detailed on page 12 of the Standard newspaper. Equally, the very same story on the front page of the Daily Nation, up for grabs, 5,000 teaching jobs countrywide. And of course, and what President Uhuru Kenyatta ordered yesterday to the county, that indeed there's a cash stalemate, and it's important that we acknowledge that, money is not like manna that would come from heaven. So we should work with what we have as it stands. And equally, the Star newspaper, the biggest story up now as big tribes dominate NHIF, NSSF, and jobs. So what are the tribes? We're talking about Kikuyu, Kamba. Of course, they certainly share top positions in government agencies. Details of this particular story on page 4 and 5 of the Star newspaper. But before that, I think it's important we take a look at what we've prepared with my team right here in terms of news. And we have so much in store. And of course, great stories that were prepared yesterday. Is important that we go through. And we start off right here in Nairobi, as the Nairobi Central Seventh-day Adventist Church, that is rocked in controversy, has attributed the wrangles to corruption and ethnicity perpetrated by the leadership of the church. Now, Nairobi Cosmopolitan members who were actually excommunicated from the church say they had done no wrong, and the church did not follow the set out procedure in the church constitution to excommunicate them.
Don't even take my photo. Don't take my photo.
The recent presser by SDA Church concerning Nairobi Metropolitan Conference attracted mixed reaction from NCC members.
We want to categorically say that mentioning of NCC in the said press briefing was unfair and unwarranted. These statements, therefore, is to set the record straight and also inform the public on the mission and objectives of the NCC.
The act of excommunicating some of the church officials has received a lot of criticism as the NCC members accused the procedure as null and void, for it did not follow the church constitution.
There is a case of the 15 members of Nairobi Central SDA Church who were reportedly removed from the church register.
So Kiragu and his team have no right to buy anybody from entering any church in the Republic of Kenya.
If a madman went to the market and declared himself the president of Kenya, will he be the president of Kenya? No. If somebody is declaring that I have removed, and it was a decree.
Tribalism and nepotism by a few members of the church raised eyebrows, and it's being viewed as one of many issues causing divisions within the church.
The church's leaders have effectively divided church members along ethnic lines to achieve and retain church administrative power to facilitate their continued blunder of church resources.
Samuel Masara downplayed the recent accusation on tribes, saying 90% of top leadership is held by non-Kisis.
They started to manipulate the delegates in this conference. Today, as we are speaking here, you want to find out that 90% of the head elders who are heads of the churches in Kajiado, Nairobi, in this region, 90% of them are non-Kisis. 90.
Dr. Charles Maranga has called all leaders accused of any ill-doing to resign and pave way for investigations.
Or demanding that the leaders of Central Kenya Conference resign. The leaders of East Kenya Union Conference resign. Leaders of the Eastern
Central Africa Division.
East and Central Africa Division, that is headed by Pastor Ruguri, resign.
Reporting for Ebru TV, I'm Kaindo Stefano.
And now, Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko has directed the county executive to withdraw the legal notice that allowed for immediate implementation of the 2019 finance bill. The governor called for further consultation on a raft of proposed charges contained in the bill.
The county government of Nairobi had proposed a raft of changes, among them an outrageous proposal to charge any chicken that was brought to the city from upcountry. The appropriation bill, in a bid to seal the revenue gap, had also proposed to charge mosques and churches for waste collection, amongst other charges. But the city father, Mike Mbuvi Sonko, would hear none of it.
Yeah? You cannot create your own laws or proposals without consulting me. That is very wrong, Bwana Kirich. Na mawaziri. Hii power mnajipea and then pole pole.
Sonko accused his county executive committee members of creating laws that are meant to harm the common person.
Hatuwezi kuleta sheria ambayo inapiga Wanjiko ama wananchi wa chini. And then I'm on record every time ati kutetea wananchi. Hiyo itakuwa kama mimi na pretend.
An issue which he says was instigated by his executive members working with dark forces with a view to undermine him.
And I think you are receiving instructions from somewhere, you guys. You are receiving instructions from somewhere. This is politics, and you want to finish me politically, and I'll never allow this to happen under my watch. Forget it.
A tough-talking Sonko said the appropriation was dead on arrival, and further consultation is required.
We seek for an adjournment, executive tukae chini, then you explain some of these issues. Kwa sababu kuna mambo nazi abolish on arrival. For instance, the taxes you are imposing on mosques and churches, don't forget it. Yeah. The fire charges you are imposing on the residents of Nairobi as per households, forget it. Charge the business premises alone.
He directed for the revoking of the legal notice.
So, this legal notice. If there is a legal way of revoking it, let it be revoked. We must follow the law. Hakuna legal notice itakuja, may bypass governor, it may bypass assembly, then you're telling Nairobians, implement, pay this amount without my knowledge. That forget it. You're cancelled. I'm with you.
He also said that places of religious worship should not be charged for waste collection, and the fee charged to small dealers of cooking gas be reduced from 30,000 shillings per year back to the previous rate of 4,500 shillings per year.
Mambo ya mosque hiyo sahau, disaster, mambo ya kulipisha plots sahau. We only have one governor in this city. If you are serving somebody else huko regiment, akupatie sheria yake na huko regiment, not in Nairobi City County. Msiletee mambo yenu hapa. So hiyo forget it. Kulipisha wananchi sahau. Kulipisha mashule sahau. Kanisa, msikiti sahau. Na yule amekasirika, he can quit or she can quit and go home.
He, however, advocated for the increase of charges in the CBD.
We can increase. CBD, we can increase. Yeah? Because we cannot talk of decongesting our great city of Nairobi, then at the same time we reduce the parking. Here we are encouraging motorists to come and congest our city. So CBD, no negotiation, it has to remain 400, or we increase to 400.
He was speaking when he joined the staff of the county government and members of the Nairobi County Assembly Committee on Finance, Budget and Appropriation to review the 2019 Finance Bill proposals.
Governor, I want to introduce our...
The Nairobi County government is targeting to raise 17.3 billion shillings in its own source revenue. In the financial year ended June 30th, the county raised 10.17 billion shillings, a 1% increase from the 10.1 billion raised in the previous year.
All right, here we are back with a different story. Now, the High Court has allowed Samburu Governor Moses Lenang Kulal to access his 2 bank accounts. However, Justice John Onyego maintained the orders freezing the remaining 2 accounts until the case involving loss of a possible 1.6 billion shillings is heard and determined. Our reporter Jeff Haimba with more details.
Moses Lenang Kulal Kasaini, the Samburu County Governor, is still fighting so hard to get access to his bank accounts. This is after the Ethics and the Anti-Corruption Commission EACC asked the court to dismiss an application by the governor to get hold of his bank deposits. Delivering the ruling, Justice John Onyego said the 2 bank accounts have no direct connection over the alleged loot of the 84 million Kenyan shillings, which is part of the 1.6 billion Kenyan shillings scandal the governor is battling with.
It's my finding that the applicant has not proved that the lifting orders in his favor outweighs the advantages or benefits in retaining them. In case of any inconvenience on the applicant's part, he can open new accounts and continue his legitimate business as well as accrue his salary. He will not suffer any inconvenience in his daily operations and his money is safe until investigations are over. It is my finding that the application here partly fails and partly succeeds to the extent that A, the freezing orders affecting KCB account numbers 11-044-311-9899 and 1234-70-8647 are hereby lifted.
The embattled governor had sought unconditional access to 4 bank accounts held at the Kenya Commercial Bank KCB, saying he is not able to access his salary so as to cater for his personal and the family subsistence, utilities, bills and other accruing expenses. By now, the governor is battling to get access to the remaining 2 bank accounts in question.
B, the freezing orders in respect of KCB bank accounts numbers 11-08-31-208 and 11-08-16-8841 shall remain in force. Each party to bear his own costs.
However, Moses Lenang Kulal's share of relief was short-lived. This is after the prosecution team sought for the stay orders. They seek to appeal the decision.
In respect of the order made against the 2 accounts that have been lifted, we are also praying for leave to appeal against those orders made in respect of the 2 accounts.
On the issue of the stay of the 2 accounts that have been lifted, We do pray that they do a formal application, put a formal application on record.
Stay of 14 days granted. Copy of the ruling and proceedings to be supplied.
The Ethics and the Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, is investigating the allegation of the corruption and the economic crime, bribery, conflict of interest among the contractors and the officials of the Samburu County government, where 1.6 billion Kenyan shillings was alleged to have been embezzled between January 2013 and December 2018. Reporting for Ebru TV, I'm Jeff Khaemba.
All right, and to another story that equally has found itself into the corridors of justice is that President Uhuru Kenyatta has once again told off governors over the division of revenue bill stalemate. Now, this is the second time the commander-in-chief reiterated that resources are limited in the country and that the governors should take the 316.5 billion. The two houses are before the Supreme Court seeking an advisory over the matter, with a case up in the cards today.
Just a day after the newly appointed acting cabinet secretary of the National Treasury, Ukur Yatani, urged the Senate to allow counties to take 50% of 310 billion that was earlier proposed by the Treasury and adopted by the National Assembly before mediation. The president has read from the same script as his minister.
In the current circumstances, while those things are being sorted out,
National we can still access 50% as brought on account, pending, the bill to be passed.
50% would not prejudice anybody. Because sometimes we tend to operate as if money is in a tiririka too, no?
The stalemate between the National Assembly and the Senate over the division of revenue was occasioned by both houses projecting different figures of 316 billion and 335 billion respectively. This stalemate brought the county's operation to a screeching halt, forcing the County Workers' Union Secretary General Robert Duba to issue a strike if the workers are not paid.
Money is limited, resources are limited. Yeah? And really, I just wish to even take this opportunity once again to plead to our houses of parliament, both the Senate and the National Assembly. We cannot give that which does not exist. Let us take what we have. Ikiongezeka, tutaongeza. Lakini jameni, let us just take what we have. What are we arguing about? Because kama ingekuweko, si tungewapatia.
The Finance Committee Chairman Ali Mohamud directed the Attorney General's office to issue an advisory opinion by the end of today so as to allow counties to receive 50% of the shareable revenue. This even as the matter is before the Supreme Court and the mention of the said case will be on 15th of this month.
Within 1 year of taking office in 2013, I had moved that figure to close to 30%. Sasa jameni, labda mimi ndio nilifanya makosa.
According to the Kenya County Government Workers Union Secretary General Robert Duba, 7 counties, West Pokot, Kilifi, Kisumu, Samburu, Homa Bay, Kitui, and Laikipia have not paid their workers. The stalemate was also witnessed during the financial year 2014 and 2015, where the Division of Revenue was before the courts, and the court ruled that the counties should gain access to a proportion of the shareable revenue as the houses settled their differences. Chief Justice David Maraga directed both a Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi, and his counterpart of the Senate, Kenneth Lusaka, to find an amicable solution to end the quagmire facing county governments. Abdiaziz Hashim, Ebru TV.
All right, welcome on board. And I think that very story equally is part of what we'll be discussing this morning as to the kind of stalemate, the business, in matters business sector. We take a look at the economic stalemate that has been caused by this standoff that we witnessed between the two levels of the House. And of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta candidly maintaining his stand that yes, the governors should work with the 316.5 billion allocated by, of course, the National Assembly, contrary to what the Senate would sort of propose, that is 335. And we've started witnessing the stalemate that has been brought about by this. The county workers made good their threat to sort of down their tools in different counties, something that will certainly have an economic impact. And I think that is what we'll be discussing this morning. Actually, it's not that I think, I know. And Enoch Munari joins me. Before we take a look at what the dailies have to say, CPA, What do you make of what President Uhuru Kenyatta is coming in to sort of what is his strategy that is bringing aboard to address this? Because then it is a clear picture that he's going to sort of give the National Assembly the stamina to maintain its stance and sort of fail to allocate this amount of money to the county, which probably would have been necessary for the development and of course for the proper running of the county.
No, I think there is a lot of dishonesty from his part, especially when he talks about Hakuna Pesa. I mean, considering that we just had our budget out like 2 months ago, and it's a 3 trillion budget, and the counties are only getting a mere 300 billion, which is probably around 10%. We are allocating so much money to the national government, knowing very well that the intention of the new constitution was to try and push funds to the counties so that we can be able to ensure that development goes to the villages, which is actually what we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. But from the attitude that we're seeing from the president and the national government and the National Assembly is that there are no intentions actually to be able to do this. I mean, the governors are only asking for another 20 or so billion more. The amount that we lost in 2 dams, which is Aurora and Kimwarer, that is actually the portion that the governors are asking. And the governors are making it very clear. The revenue allocation formula that is being used is actually wrong. We cannot be basing the 15% on the last audited financial statements of the government, which is 2015-2016 or 2016-2017. There's been a lot of expansion in terms of how much we collect since that time. So the president has to stand up and be honest enough and say whether his intention is to support the counties or actually his intention is to kill devolution altogether, because that is what is coming out.
All right, of course, we get to discuss that and more, starting on a very heated note. Of course, I'd love to know if the country has enough money to sustain this budget that is being asked for by the government or the county governments, because then again, we all understand very well that the taxpayer is feeling the pinch of trying to service the budget that we have today or sustain the budget that we have, and even more, service the loans that we have or as it stands today. So probably the government does not have money, or maybe the governors know that there's plenty of money somewhere that is being misused by individuals who are not supposed to do that. So we'll be discussing that as we proceed with the program. But before that, let's take a look at just some of the key stories that are on the newspapers. And I think that is also one of the stories that is on the front page of the Daily Nation. Uhuru orders end to county cash stalemate. We'll just get to listen to what the president had to say later on as we proceed, exact words, and then of course we come and get to react on the economic implications of this stalemate that we witnessed today. But also, one of the biggest story, of course, is that up for grabs, about 5,000 positions have been created by the TSC, of course, to ensure that they bridge in the gap that has been witnessed there in terms of course, we lacked tutors in our very own school. So that is a good move towards creating jobs, even though we see a level of stalemate in how they have addressed the issues to do with education in the country.
No, I mean, we still have a lot to do, especially when it comes to recruitment, because we've not achieved the globally accepted numbers in terms of how many teachers ratio to the students. And when you walk out here and you see the number of graduates we have, especially in the education sector, there are so many. I mean, if they're employing today, I can tell you, especially primary school teachers, they will be employing teachers who graduated probably in 2015 or 2016. So you still have a lot of graduates who are out here and are hoping that for one day they can be able to be recruited. But it's a good move. We need more teachers, and I mean those are sources of employment that we all cry for.
Yeah, we can only hope that they're free and fair processes for that matter. And now Washington wants Nairobi to hand over a former senior officer in the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, a number of judges and several top government officials to U.S. authorities on drug-related charges in dramatic escalation of the war on drugs. But will Kenya play the ball? Of course, top Kenyans to face U.S. trial over Akasha drugs. What do you make of this? It's a story that is still ongoing. Looks like it's going to drag in lots and lots of people.
You see, what I like about the U.S., and I think I was sharing this with someone yesterday, they don't move to houses and break doors and sniffing compounds around, like we saw in Mombasa the other day. They do a lot of thorough research. And for the case of Akasha, they did a serious investigation before they could actually be able now to say, now, we have enough evidence. And I can tell you, if they have picked out specific Kenyans who they believe were involved in the drug deals, those guys will find it difficult. And Kenya will not have no option because we've signed to international treaties on how we should be able to deal with such matters. And if a request is made, a formal request through the Attorney General of the US or through the courts, that those guys be extradited to the US, I'm very sure it will happen.
It will happen.
Yes.
Okay, well, speaking of the US and how well they conduct some of their activities, we'll also be taking a look at, a reaction, or better yet, an expounded clip of about 10 minutes that sort of gives us a picture of the SME in the United States and the SMEs world in the country, and, some of the things that they have done special that has made it, something that is very good in terms of boosting their economy, and some of the things that we can actually borrow as a country and the shortfalls that we have, and we'll certainly expect to have, a 5 minutes reaction as to what he says as to this. So we'll be listening to that clip by Peter Karenge Nganga later on the broadcast, giving us a comparison of the SME world, between the United States and, of course, Kenya, and we just get to see what are some of the things that we can borrow to tighten or to strengthen our SME world. But that aside, also the front page of the Standard newspaper, Waiguru says that Mount Kenya is ready for Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Kirinyaga governor praises former PM as a leader who understands challenges of women and says that the region is not averse to a political deal with him ahead in 2022. 2022 politics.
All politics is local. And having seen the kind of run-ins that the Right Honorable has had, especially with the governor for Kirinyaga, Waiguru, when she was the CS devolution, sometimes you get surprised when these statements come out, but I believe they're coming out in the spirit of the handshake.
Right.
And sometimes some of those statements may appear to be so truthful, but probably it's just lip service. We still wait to see what happens, but the 2022 race is so complicated that no one can actually be able to stand out and say, this is the direction that we'll go. We still have to wait and see whether the Mount Kenya region will actually be willing to support another candidate outside the region. Because remember, ever since independence, Mount Kenya has always had a candidate. And they have always voted for their man. Even during Moi's time, 1992, up to the last man, it was Kenneth Matiba. 1997, up to the last man, it was Mwai Kibaki. 2002, almost up to the last man, it was Mwai Kibaki. 2007, it was Mwai Kibaki to the last man. 2013 and 2017, it has been Uhuru Kenyatta to the last man.
True.
So I don't know what will change. History actually stands to prove us wrong. If the Mount Kenya region, that is Kikuyu, Embu, and Meru, can stand up and say, we are actually supporting a different person. We wait to see.
We'll wait to see. As always, they'll always want to know what is left for us, what is left for our people. So this is an interesting twist equally on our 2022 politics, but nothing that is strange because we all expected this talk of Right Honorable Raila Odinga taking the mantle in, come 2022. But aside from politics, as we cross over, in about a minute to go for break, KRA hunts for 600 tax cheats to recover 15 billion. And of course, the taxman will dangle plea bargain deals to some suspects who will voluntarily pay up in exchange for amnesty. This KRA thing, though.
That actually takes you back to the Tax Appeals Tribunal. And I still again blame the Jubilee government because we have a Tax Tribunal Act that was passed in 2013. The tribunal was actually formed and their term expired in April 2018. And they did a fantastic job in terms of arbitration on tax matters. Then out deliberately, the CS Treasury then decided not to appoint new members to the tribunal. So we've not had a tribunal from April 2018 up to June this year. And what KRA has been doing during this period has been to push people around, freezing bank accounts, freezing property, and of course sending tax bills, knowing that people have no avenue to go to the tribunal because the tribunal is not properly constituted. People have no avenue to go to the High Court because the law is clear that you have to go through the tribunal before you can be able to go to the High Court. And that's how we have ended in this situation. But it's a good thing if people can be able to negotiate with KRA and pay up the tax that they truthfully believe they never paid. It's a good thing for this country because we want businesses to continue. At the same time, we want people to pay tax. Because closing businesses is not enough. I mean, look at the case of Humphrey Kariuki. African Spirits has been closed from February this year. And those are loss of jobs. As much as there are valid claims against tax, against him and tax evasion, This was a local company that was doing local manufacturing, that was employing people locally and buying materials locally. If this issue had been sorted out in another way, we could still have the 300 or 400 or 500 people who are working there working. Right now, they don't have jobs.
All right, that is interesting, and also an interesting twist. I think we should be having that discussion on some of the crackdowns that the government does, and and whether they consider, of course, the kind of jobs that the people who are involved in this crackdown. Because equally, when you look at the betting firms and that aspect of revoking their licenses and all that, at some point in time, SportPesa coming out to sort of pull out from all the sponsorship programs that it had, then it's a clear indication that, of course, the common mwananchi is at a loss in a huge way. So some of these crackdowns are good indeed, but then does the government sit down to put into consideration the creation of jobs that, of course, are within these entities and a lot of things that, of course, would be of benefit to the common mwananchi. But that is a discussion for another day. We take a short breather right here. Remember, the SMS line is 40920. Of course, we'll love to hear what you have to say. Later on, we come back, of course, 15 minutes of discussing the SME world and equally 15 minutes of basically taking a look at the stalemate that we witness at our counties today. Do not go anywhere.
SMEs, that's small and medium enterprises. And what you have, they're defined differently. An SME, for example, in the United States is defined as depending on the industry. An SME in construction is a business entity that's making, on an average, 25 million US dollars. That's probably maybe 2.5 billion over a period of 3 years. So on average, that is in construction. But what you'll find that in consulting, it's a bit less. What you have here at home is, yes, they are recognized, small and medium enterprises, but the definition isn't as articulate as it should be. And what that does is there's a lot of gray areas. And of course, that which is not defined is hard to support, is hard to articulate. I think that's one of the areas that we want to see more is just a clearer definition. Once it's clearly defined, then it's that much easier than to figure out how to support the SMEs. How do you support a $2.5 million small or medium enterprise in Kenya? And then how would the government support that more? How did it put it more into the Big Four agenda? How did it create a database more? These are some of the recommendations that we have put across in our day-to-day conversations with the government on how to support SMEs. Definitely in the US, it's much more better documented, but also here in Kenya, it's agreed that SMEs, or small and medium enterprises, this means from that Juakali guy who is a sole proprietorship and a small business as such, to even some of the larger companies that may look as large companies but are actually medium enterprises. So SMEs, they definitely employ more than 90% of what our workforce. So you can see the kind of impact they have. However, that may not be translated, or that is not being translated into the kind of importance they have. As I say, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a clear definition of what that SME entails. Yeah, so definitely there is need. There's a lot of need to be very, very clear as to what that does. The way they do it in the States, as I've said, is not just once they've been defined, then you have very, very clear administrative bodies, very, very powerful, like the Small Business Administration, that ensures that not only are they protected, anywhere taxpayer money is being utilized in a project, there has to be a certain amount of SME participation, usually ranging anywhere between 25% to 35%. So what you're saying is anytime a small business or a medium enterprise is able to show that the business or 3 other businesses can actually handle a project, that project should be done by a small and medium enterprise. As far as they show they have the capability, they have the workforce, they have the technical approach, and they can raise the funding if necessary, not for the project, but funding to run the project. Agriculture is a huge, is one of the largest, I think it is the largest contributor as far as the GDP is concerned in Kenya. But before I move to that, you talked about youth and the SME, because remember, at the end of the day, the SME, it's a corporation, or it's an entity that's ran and started by people. But let's just backtrack a little bit to the people who are running the SME. In my opinion, is one of the key areas to start. Yes, the government has a lot to do, and I've articulated that. It is not the government that is supposed to be leading the way as far as where we are heading. It is the private sector, it's the entrepreneurs, it's the youth who should create the appetite. Then the government will come in to regulate and to protect them and to encourage them. Yeah. And the reason why I'm saying this, Wanjiru, is I think one of the key areas that we are struggling as a country is, yes, we are working hard, but are we working hard enough? Are we productive as a country? We say the youth is the future, but how productive are they? What kind of a work day are our youth in Kenya providing in relationship to what you have in other countries? If I'm selling my tomatoes, do I have to sell them in Nairobi? Can I sell them in Kisumu? Can I sell them in Uganda? Can I take them to Ethiopia? Can I take them to Congo? But these need to get out there. If one person here is working very hard, just like in school, if you are working very hard to get good grades and you're burning the midnight oil, but then your friend here knows that they will figure out a way of passing the exam without having to burn that midnight oil, then chances are you will be that less encouraged to do so. Then finally, it's just the work ethic, and those are related. Most of the time, it is good. I like what some people say is that if you want something done, give it to a lazy person, they'll figure out the easiest way. But sometimes they just need to be able to just be able to grind, And what that will do is, now once that is coupled with the kind of people you are, the kind of people, the intelligent, the smart, the people who like to be happy, then we'll be a force to reckon with, not just here in Kenya, but in the world also. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's time to go back to work.
Well, in a nutshell, I would say notable points that have been highlighted as to what we can pick up, of course, from the best, or maybe from the people who are getting it right in the SME world. And of course, I'll not have to add so much, but I'll certainly allow my guest on set to sort of agree or disagree with some of the pointers that have been brought aboard. And, just moving forward, give us advice as a country as to what we can do to make the best of the SME world, because it's necessary when you realize that that's where the world is headed. And that's how that is how, of course, many of the best countries, or the countries that are doing well economically, have sort of channeled their efforts on.
Okay, the first thing I'll want to say is that Kenya and the US are worlds apart. Yeah. I mean, for an entity that is generating revenues of 2.5 billion shillings in Kenya, that actually falls nowhere near an SME. In KRA, they will fall under the Large Taxpayers Office because that's a key company in tax collection in the country. But let me just go back to our laws, because there was an issue on how we've defined our SMEs. We have the Micro and Small Enterprises Act 2012, and it actually defines a micro enterprise as a firm, a trade, service, industry, or business activity whose annual turnover does not exceed 500,000 shillings, which employs less than 10 people. And it also defines a small enterprise as a firm, trade, service, or industry whose annual turnover ranges between 500,000 and 5 million shillings and employs between 10 and 50 people. So in terms of definition, it is well defined in the Act. This is an Act of Parliament, and that is what guides us, especially...
Could the Act have looked down on the capability of these sectors?
No, in terms of the turnover ranges, I actually have no problem with a turnover range of between 500,000 and 5 million. Probably what you expect is probably to expand it to 20 or 30 million, because we have entities that are generating up to 50 or so million, because the economy has expanded, but are still small in terms of operations. The only challenge that we probably have in Kenya is the support structure for these SMEs. And I think that has come out clearly from him, that developed countries have found a way of having a serious support structure for the SMEs. That is what we don't have. In terms of how banks support the SMEs, how government agencies support SMEs, in terms of how people can be able to access contracts and all those things, that is what we're missing as a country. And if that is addressed, and my prayer is to the young parliamentarians we have in Parliament, to be able to sit and look at like this Act here and see how they can be beefed up to a level that the government actually is compelled to support the SMEs through ensuring that there are specific jobs that have to go to the SMEs, and the SMEs have a way they can be able to access capital. That can be able to help us. And two other things that he has actually mentioned is the private sector leading the way. And he's right. We cannot wait for the national government or for the government to show us the way. It is the private sector, it is the entrepreneurs who have to show the way. Because the ideas are not with the government. The ideas are with people who are in business, who are thinking every day and developing ideas. So we have to show the way. I mean, in developed countries, the entrepreneurs have shown the way. And they are big, and they are reaping big from opportunities that come. So let's not just sit back and hope that one day the government will pass a law that supports the SMEs fully. Let's try and lead the way as entrepreneurs, as the private sector, so that the government will have no option than to support these entities. Because then once the government realizes that 30 or 40% of the revenue that it collects comes from the private sector, from the small and medium enterprises, they'll have no option but be able to support them. And the other thing that he has mentioned, and that actually goes to the young people, is work ethic. We miss that in this country. Because we have a whole lot of young generation who are crying for jobs, who are crying that SportPesa has been suspended, so they're not able to bet and pay their rent, because that is the kind of lazy life that they got used to. So we must be able to change our work ethic and our way of thinking. Let's move away from the fact that I have to get a job to what can I do to sustain my life and to sustain my family. Things will always work out. The moment you say that you're going to be consistent in how you approach your issues, in the kind of business that you're doing, in your jobs, that hard work, the kind of work ethic that you have, that you know you wake up early, you ensure that you're putting in a lot of time in what you're doing, you're doing a lot of research and all those things, it will always work out. So, but he's right. We are worlds apart, and we have a lot to do when it comes to developing our...
very honest world. And a clear indication that indeed there is that possibility of course, enlarging this sector in the event that we put support, as you've rightfully put it. Of course, this is a discussion that is bound to be expounded even more, because there's so much so in the SME world, but we'll not proceed with that because then we've picked the key things, and we certainly say that, of course, we have people and figures who understand this and will certainly lead the way as opposed to waiting for the government to do that. But that aside, on a subject that we've touched on briefly, and I think because then we don't have so much time, we'll equally just expand a little bit of it. And, you know, that is on the county level. Of course, the standstill, the revenue allocation standstill that we witnessed today, it is a developing story. So today we wait to see what, of course, advisory sort of makes it they're going to get, or maybe advisory move they're going to get from the Supreme Court. But before that, it's important that we get to address the standstill that we witnessed today in terms of the economy. So before we get to have, of course, the sentiments of Enoch Munari, let's first of all listen in to this clip on what it is like in some of the counties, and equally a back-to-back, of course, video coming from the president and how he reacted to, of course, the kind of stalemate that we're witnessing right now in the county level.
Because sometimes we tend to operate as if money is inatiririka tu. No? Money is limited, resources are limited. Yeah? And really, I just wish to even take this opportunity once again to plead to our houses of parliament, both the Senate and the National Assembly. We cannot give that which does not exist. Let us take what we have. Ikiongezeka, tutaongeza. Lakini jameni, let us just take what we have. What are we arguing about? Because kama ingekuweko, si tungewapatia. Within 1 year of taking office in 2013, I had moved that figure to close to 30%. Sasa jameni, labda mimi ndio nilifanya makosa.
The budget is not in any way preventing them from paying salary.
Bwana Spika, tunajua uwezo wako na executive imetudanganywa.
Salary for June, salary for May was in the last year budget. So today they cannot say, if they are not paid that, let them explain where that money is.
Just because of you, I am going to Gazette Friday to pass this budget. But we are not passing the budget as it is. We will only authorize vote on accounts for salaries to be paid until compliance.
Kuna mtu anajua tumekosea, atushike sasa, atutumbukize pale ndani, tuende jela, tuko tayari kukufa kwa ajili ya wafanyakazi. The governor should come straight and say, vile wafanyikazi wanasema ndiye amewatuma, aseme sisi ni wafanyikazi wa nani? Kwani sisi si wafanyakazi wa kaunti yake?
As they would say it, fahali wawili wakipigana nyasi huumia, and you can clearly tell it from the union, of course, officials, that it is a painful experience at that level of the county. Where does it place us, economically, and just looking at the fact that we have all put our eyes to see to it that devolution is a success today?
You see, the most critical element in all that we do in business, even in government, is the human resource. Right. These are the same people that you expect to be able to implement whatever projects that you are undertaking. The same people that you want to implement the budget, to implement your vision and your strategic plan. So if these people are disoriented like you've seen some of them are, you don't expect much. Yeah. And that is what is happening in government agencies, even in KRA. But let me go back to the reality on how the counties have been operating. One, the government has never obeyed the law as it is in terms of how money is supposed to move to counties. Right. The law is very clear that by a given date, the whole amount for a given quarter should be able to move to the counties, for the counties to manage, because counties are autonomous and they manage their own budgets. But what the national government has done for the last 1 year or so is they have forced the counties to make monthly requests for what they require. So counties were reduced to basically writing requests through the CEC finance or the chief officer to that, this month I need to pay salaries of this much, and I need this much for recurrent, and that is what is moved from treasury to these counties. Why? Because the government has been struggling to repay the loans that we had that were coming due, and we've had a challenge, especially on cash flows for the government. which of course is not an issue of the counties, it's an issue of the national government and how they have been managing the budgets. So as much as the employees are making a lot of noise directed at the governors, we need to direct our anger at the right place. And that is the president. Parliament, that is the National Assembly and the Senate, they have not done their job. And it still goes back to the former CS Treasury. We are at a stalemate now because someone decided to go to Parliament, present a budget before agreeing with the Senate on how much needed to go to the counties. Because the division of revenue bill should have been discussed long before the budget. Because what was the budget? How much? So the figures that he put in the budget was hinged on which law? That is the challenge, and that's where we are where we are.
Where would it have placed the country at large? Because then we equally know very well that the reading of the budget is done at this particular time. And as it stands, we still do not have answers. So could we have postponed the reading of the budget up until today where we've not even gotten a solution to this?
No, if the division of revenue bill had been presented in Parliament in March, we could have had enough time to discuss that so that we will be ready for the budget in June. But things happened. We ended up with budget reading before the division of revenue bill had been passed. Even the appropriation bill had been passed. And that is actually what's supposed to happen. So we've ended in a situation whereby the president is worked up because all the blame will end up in his office on why the counties are actually more of paralyzed. But the truth is, due to the lack of leadership from the Treasury and from the executive, we've ended up where we are. And we should not be waiting for Supreme Court advisory opinions to tell us how we share our money. It is our money. I mean, they just need a meeting and agree that this is the much that is going to the counties. Whatever that you've asked for, let's reach a concession and they can be able to agree. I mean, these are men that we've entrusted with these officers to be able to lead this country. So the mere fact that we have a grandstanding between National Assembly, the president, that's the executive, and the county through the governors on how much is supposed to go to the counties actually shows lack of leadership. And the president has to stand up and say, look, the 47 governors or the chairman of the Council of Governors, we need to have a meeting because that meeting has never taken place. Let's have a meeting. Let's discuss these issues and get a stalemate. Let's not wait for an advisory opinion from the Supreme Court to tell us how we are supposed to eat. Because it is our money.
Let's just be realistic a bit. Yes, it could be our money, and you know, the economic wisdom would probably call for a lot of scrutiny before you award some of these monies. We look at the question of accountability. We've not been able to get proper accountability, you know, from the counties. Equally, collection of revenue, not so rosy, of course, from that point of the county. Looking at the budget that we have today, standing at about 3 trillion and something, we've not even been able to sustain the budget. As it stands, then we have to pinch the taxpayer even harder so that we are able to sustain the budget. We're talking about the loans that we are supposed to service. Sincerely speaking, would it not just be wise to sort of try and create some level of balance in how we're dealing with our resources? And maybe that's the reason why President Uhuru Kenyatta says, you know, there's no money. In as much as day in, day out, there's a clear indication that there's plenty of money that is being used on the question of corruption.
No, we have a lot of money. And let me tell you, our budget has been designed in a way that a third of the money goes to corruption. That is the design of our budget. So on issues of whether we have money to go to the counties or not, we have the money. The issue is the dishonesty on how the budget is prepared and money is being channeled by the national government to places where they can be able to access it. They know very well that if money goes to the counties, it is the governors who have control, so they won't have access to the money. Remember, these governors have been given 14 functions. One key function is health, that they are supposed to sustain. And they cannot do that without money. So the government has to stand up and say, this is the kind of support we want to give to the governors. This is what we expect in return. And these are discussions that we should be having after we've allocated the money, so that we can agree on how we go forward. I mean, it's not like the president woke up in 2019 and realized that the counties have not been collecting money from 2013. These are discussions that we are having. Systems have to be in place in counties to ensure that the counties are playing their role. But on issues of accountability, the national government has no moral standing to lecture the counties on how they spend their money. Because the money is being lost in the national government. Billions and billions. And I told you, the money that we lost in Aurora and Kimorer, which is 21 billion shillings, is enough to fund 3 counties for a whole financial year. That is one project in one ministry. So imagine how much we've lost through Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Power, through National Cereals Board and all those entities. These are not county entities. These are national government entities. So counties are only asking for 20 billion more.
All right.
A concession can be able to be reached, but grant standing cannot help this country.
Okay, so what is the worst?
Because at the end of the day, it actually shows that the leaders that we have at national level have no interest to support devolution. So the whole idea is we should do with devolution altogether. And I think the Kenyans do not like that.
Speaking of which, devolution is supposed to serve and service the projects for the common mwananchi. But when you see the kind of stalemate we witnessed today, of course, it's not even the governors that are feeling the pinch. The people who are feeling the pinch are definitely the people, of course, at that level of the county. So what is the worst that can happen in the event that maybe this governors would have just taken the 316 point something and, of course, proceed with the case as they work with this to avoid the stalemate that we witnessed today, maybe as we wind up?
No, I think for the governors, they are right to ask for what is right. And they have been asking for this for a very long time, saying that, look, the formula that you're using is actually wrong. We need more money. And remember, the Senate has even gone ahead to pass the Division of Revenue Bill with a low amount, which is more of concessional. So it's actually the National Assembly that is supposed to pass. So we cannot just say that, you governors, just take the 316 or 325 because actually there's no money. And the governors know very well how much is retained in the national government. They cannot, and remember, they have been elected by the people to represent them, to ensure that resources go to the counties. They have budgets that they have to implement. They can only implement if we have incremental kind of allocations to the counties over the years. So if you have a health function that people are crying that is not being funded well, you are supposed to employ more nurses and the health officers. You are supposed to employ ECD teachers. You don't have the money. You've been receiving almost the same kind of budget. You will get stuck. You cannot be able to move as a county. And at the end of the day, politically, it is the governor who will appear to have failed. Not the president.
Not the president.
Yes.
Well, ironically, and we closely follow on the development of this particular issue, as of course we wait to see what will play out today, from that level of the Supreme Court, and we'll be here to update you on our subsequent programs as to what comes out this. And most importantly, we only hope that indeed the county workers will be paid so that duties will, of course, resume to normalcy at that level of the different counties that have gone on a stalemate. Otherwise, we can only hope for the best, because then this is for the best of the common mwananchi. This is for the best of devolution, which was the easiest way of getting to the common mwananchi at the grassroots. Thank you so much, CPA Enoch Munari, who's equally an economist. It's been great having you this morning, and we have to say asante sana, and that's where we get to wind up the show. We say thank you also to you, who's been with us right from the start of the hour and up until now. Up next is Voice of America Straight Talk Africa. Thank you so much. My name is Linda Alela.